So now we'll be joined by a panel of parenting experts. And to lead us in a conversation about parenting in a dynamic digital world is a very good friend of mine and FOSI's, Catherine Titelbaum. Catherine is the head of Family Trust for Amazon Kids, where she directs initiatives that empower families to confidently navigate the digital world. Catherine is a former educator, an industry veteran with over 2 decades of experience in trust and safety and privacy. She previously led trust and safety at Twitch, Amazon's live streaming service, and Yahoo, where she oversaw the award-winning Yahooligans and Yahoo Education products, as well as global policy initiative. And this session kind of came out of a really good conversation on the West Coast back in the summer, and I'll let her talk about that as well. So please join me in welcoming Catherine and her wonderful panel to the stage.
Music is lovely, isn't it? I'm Catherine Titelbaum, and I'm head of Family Trust for Amazon Kids, and maybe more importantly today, I believe this is my 15th FOSI event. I've missed a few, but and I'm so excited to speak with this panel of experts today about a topic that, as Steve has mentioned, has become the focus of my career. I never get tired of thinking about children and technology and the intersection of that technology with their lives and with their families' lives. And I don't know, this year feels different. It really does, and I've noticed it in my conversations in the hallways and at the tables. It's been highlighted throughout the day, but things are moving, things are changing, and they're changing very, very quickly. This panel, like I said, has a wealth of knowledge to share, and between us, I think we're parents to about half a dozen kids, besides our professional interest. And I thought it would be fun to just start with a question and ask you to introduce yourselves by way of answering that question. So panelists, starting with Ash, can you both tell us a little bit about yourself and also share a story or of the most recent or most memorable conversation you've had with your family about technology?
Yeah, well, thank you. My name is Ash Brandin. I use they, them pronouns, and in my day job, I am a middle school librarian in the Front Range of Colorado. But in my spare time, I run an Instagram account called The Gamer Educator, and on that platform, I help educate and empower caregivers and parents to better understand technology, screen time, video games for their kids, and find ways to make it manageable and sustainable and beneficial for everyone in a family. So I'm thinking actually of a school example and less of my personal life example, but I was working with a kiddo recently, and I was walking them back to class, and this is a kid who honestly probably spends a little too much time online and probably could use some more caregiver support than they are currently getting. And so they definitely play a lot of current things in the gaming world online. But they saw I have like a rainbow Triforce pin on my lanyard, and they were asking me about it. They were telling me about playing Breath of the Wild, and then they said, but I'm not playing that right now. I said, well, what are you playing right now? And they said, I'm trying to be E.T. on Atari. And I just thought that was so interesting, because I think we current adults sometimes get very myopic and see these very siloed issues, like this is social media over here and video games are over there, and kids won't like this because everything now is just super, super fast and their attention spans are so short. And then there's all these moments with kids where I'm reminded that often things are a lot more intertwined and nuanced than we might think.
Thank you, I love that. David, would you like to connect?
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. I'm David Bickham. I'm assistant professor at Boston Children's Hospital and Harvard School of Medicine, and the research director at the Digital Wellness Lab there. I'm also a dad of an 11-year-old girl and my own newly minted teenager, my 13-year-old son, just turned 13 a few days ago. I have a favorite story. He and I listen to a lot of podcasts, and we're listening to a podcast about lateral thinking, and came up this question about it resolved that if you ask a Gen AI agent to give you a random number between 1 and 10, it's much more likely to give you a 7 than any other number, because it's not really giving you a random number. It's really telling you what number a person would give you if you ask them to give you a number between 1 and 10. So not necessarily something that is super helpful if you're mathematically interested in a random number. So he and I listened to this, and later, fast forward a few days, we were doing homework together, and he had a little AI bot next to his online homework assignment. And I said, ooh, let's ask it a random number. And it says, okay, it says, give me a random number between 1 and 10. And it says 7. And his response was, no way, chat. Now, if you don't have a 13-year-old, you may not know that every 13-year-old has an ongoing chat in their life at all times. It's like a chat room that they're present in. It's very confusing if you're not aware. But he talks to this chat quite a bit. It just meant he was excited about this. So we've tested on a number of Gen AI, and it also gives us 7s. And this, of course, led to a long conversation with him about what is AI, what are these bots good for? How do you use it? How do you align a task with the ability, and how do you judge whether or not it's given you a good answer? So it's hard to be a child of someone that studies this, is the long answer.
And Arjun?
Hi, everyone. I'm Arjun Venkataswamy. I'm a product manager on the Alexa Kids team at Amazon. So there we make delightful and safe experiences for kids on Alexa. And prior to that, I was a teacher just like Catherine as well. So like working with kids of all ages is really close to my heart. I have a 3-year-old and a 3-month-old, so they are not quite old enough for me to have sophisticated conversations with them about AI, but I've had conversations with AI about them. As an example, unfortunately, our newborn was very colicky, and there was a moment, must have been sometime between 1 and 4 in the morning, like who knows how the time goes at that point, but she had been screaming for about 90 minutes, and I didn't know what to do. I'd done all the things, like checked she was hungry, checked her diaper, like held her for a while. None of it worked. And then I pulled out an LLM, and I was like, I've tried all these things, I don't know what to do. And then it just gave me kind of a laundry list of suggestions that I hadn't thought of before. And one of them was to like bounce on an exercise ball, which we had actually in our basement. And I tried it, and it worked. And it's been working for the last like 2 months. So I would say like AI has saved our family.
You need a t-shirt that says that. You'd be the guy. I'm going to share a story as well. And by the way, we are going to take questions at the end, so feel free to start thinking about those. My son is a freshman in college, and over Thanksgiving, he shared with me some kind of cynical thoughts about educational institutions, their ability to keep up with technology and innovation and with their student body. And I was debating with him for a little bit, and I'm like, I don't know, give me an example. I can't quite picture this. Why are you so cynical? He's at a really good public school. And as a proof point, he says, you know that cafe you like that's right across the street from campus? You walk in there any time of day. There's everybody studying, right? And I was like, yeah, it's a large, popular cafe. Laptops open, tablets open. He says he has not walked in at all this semester where he hasn't seen on every single screen some type of AI window open. And I said, interesting. And I said, so why is that a problem? Just to see what he would say. And he said, well, I'm a semester in, and I have not had one teacher or the school tell me what the rules are yet. I'm like, oh, interesting. So as you can see, we're all at different kind of ages and stages with our parenting. I thought, we were asked to talk about like rapidly changing. And of course, the first thing I thought of is we've got to talk about AI, we've got to talk about LLMs. Let's start there and see where else we end up going. But David, can you kind of take a step back and ground us a little bit? And what is this moment in time? And are we setting ourselves up for like a completely different childhood and educational experience?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent question. I think that there are some things that I think about a lot with this topic, and one of them is what are the relationships that our kids are going to have with these bots? We talk about these parasocial relationships, which are like one-way relationships that you have with media characters, and especially with younger kids, these relationships can be exploited very easily to sell things, but also used to educate. And if you think about the ability to foster that kind of relationship, that user is going to be much more likely to be accepting of the information given. And so that means we have to be extremely careful that we're not giving that young person biased information or the dangerous information in some way. And that we also go out of our way to make sure they have the skills to question that information, even in the context of a relationship with this agent that's providing them with knowledge. So I think that's one of the key things that we need to be thinking about as we continue down this road.
Yeah, it's interesting. And so on the flip side, Arjun, you are working on creating some of this newest technologies, and I'm wondering, it's kind of the same question. Is this really new? Are we starting from scratch, or are there learnings that we can and should have or keep in mind?
It's interesting because in some ways this is kind of a perennial experience with tech. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this chatbot called Eliza. I believe it's called Eliza. I just looked it up, but I might. So it was developed in the 60s by researchers at MIT, and it essentially worked as a therapist. But logic was really simple, like if user says this, then do this. But then the researchers found that people were telling all sorts of really personal things to this chatbot, and this was a very unsophisticated chatbot at the time. This was the 60s, and if we looked at that now, obviously we wouldn't consider it AI, but AI just keeps changing. The definition keeps changing over time. And in Alexa, we've thought about Alexa as an AI since it was released over 10 years ago. But the sophistication of what that AI can do has changed over time. So I like to think about what we're doing as just a continuation of a through line that has been running for decades. And now with generative AI has just added one more layer of more sophisticated, output.
And Ash, can you bring us to the classroom or to the educational scenario? And how do you explain these changes to your students? How do you kind of put them in this moment in time?
Thinking again about, I try not to get too myopically focused on the medium at hand, and instead, I think it's really thinking about what is the skill? What is the skill that this student or my child, if I'm talking about home environment, what is the skill that they need to be able to navigate this effectively or use this effectively? And when it comes to something like AI, it's thinking about, okay, is this a tool? And if it is a tool, how do we use it? And getting them to think about the context in which its use is best or appropriate. And something I notice in my work, both in school and online, is that sometimes there's a fear that if we name these things and that we really name it with kids, that we're condoning it somehow. But of course, as you already spoke to, we cannot prevent these things, right? We can educate and we can empower and we can give that education to kids and help them understand how these things can fit into their lives, because otherwise they are still going to, right? So we can be part of that conversation. So I try to mostly focus on what's the skill I want them to have and how does that skill apply to this given medium.
I love that. What is the skill I want them to have or to develop now? One of our kind of operating tenets in my family was we're raising a future adult. So what is it now? It's age 6, at age 8, at whatever. Do they need to know what experiences do they need to have? And that's kind of what you're saying, but in the digital world. Obviously, you all think about this a lot. I'm wondering whether you all have some suggestions for most parents. Most parents do not spend nearly the amount of time that people in this room do thinking about these issues. How are they supposed to keep up in this new wild west of technology? And David, would you mind going first and telling us what the research says?
Sure. I mean, I think
research?
so. It's been a fun-filled, very packed day. But if we think back to one of the earlier sessions, Jennifer Kotler from Google said something that really resonated with me, which was that the technology's changed, but kids' needs really haven't. And I think that if we hold that central when we talk about parenting, we can learn a lot. We know a lot about what makes good parenting, and that's really authoritative parenting, which is parenting with known limits, known consequences, and lots of love and attachment. And if you, there's research that shows that type of parenting not only prepares your child for lifelong success, but also prepares them for success in the digital world. So it's less bullying, better digital citizenship. All of that can be traced back to this type of parenting. And along with those criteria is as the kids enter adolescence. Well, remember the theme of the meeting is from protection to empowerment. And this really maps onto how you should parent your kids. Right? When they're little, it's about protection. And as they age, it's about empowerment and moving them up and out into this adulthood. And really like
Is it a magic, like turn the switch?
Yeah, that happens right in the middle. Yeah, no, right. It's a general pass. But that remembering as adolescents that they're going to push against rules they don't think are fair or that they're not involved with making. And so parents need to remember that and make rules around that. Schools need to remember to engage their kids and the students as they make rules around media use. And all of that will lead to hopefully less conflict in the family, which is something, I think we've all are striving to do for families.
Yeah. Speaking of schools, Ash, have there been technical innovations or changes that have impacted the school environment in meaningful ways or changed the way you teach?
I mean, recently, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes and no. I feel like I am trying always to think about how to make it clear that, again, the skills that we are trying to make sure that students have, I want to make sure that students don't walk away thinking, well, these are academic skills for academics, right? That these are skills that live at school and that they don't apply to other parts of my life. I think that that's a huge part of what we should be thinking about when it comes to things like digital literacy, is that we might teach it in a more academic context, but we really want students and kids to be able to apply it in a really broad part of their lives, because more and more, I think especially for kids of this generation and probably younger, those parts of their lives are all interwoven. And their school life intermingles with their home life in ways that we can't really foresee. And I got into this kind of space originally because I was really interested in the use of commercial off-the-shelf gaming in music classrooms. This was at the height of the rock band era. I'm aging myself, of like 15 years ago. And at the time, I didn't really see much, and so I decided, well, I'm gonna just see what I can do in a classroom space. And instead of doing more games-based learning, I instead went the more like true like gamification route of thinking, how do I rethink my curricular structure to be game-like? I like games, my students like games. How do I make my curriculum feel as motivating as a game? And even coming in from a place of recognizing the validity of that as a pastime, I think goes a really, really, really long way. Doesn't mean I think it's the only thing people should do with their time. It's not all I do with my time. But when we treat it from a place of moral neutrality, that goes such a long way. And when we're trying to reach families and caregivers, that is imperative, because fear does not empower, right? Fear does not make someone want to go out and feel empowered in their parenting. It just makes them feel badly. So if we can find ways to empower and make clear that like leisure is okay, it's okay to have fun, it's okay to do things because you like it, and we can do those things alongside our responsibilities in part of a balanced life, I think showing that to caregivers allows them to foster it in their kids.
I just love that you said that. It bears like a t-shirt as well. Now we're just gonna need to get one for you, David. So Arjun, you chose to work in this area of technology. And I'm wondering what excites you the most and how you think about that from an educator and a parent empowerment perspective.
Yeah, so one of the coolest things I think about this new iteration of AI tech is how much independence it provides kids to both learn but also play and create. And the barrier to entry has never been lower for creation. And in particular, like if a kid has an idea, they can sketch it out in like various forms, like images or even video, and soon, hopefully, on their own in ways that would have required like a team or like sophisticated technology beforehand. But now it is like it's going to be at everyone's fingertips soon. So I am really excited for what all of our kids are going to make and like the amazing amount of creativity that's going to get unleashed.
Thank you. And this is your warning that I'm going to, one more question, and then we're going to turn it to you guys for questions. Ash, you said something during our prep call that really, stuck with me. You said that we, parents, adults, teachers, want our kids to thrive in a world that we struggle to envision. And I was like, wow, that is it, right? Like I can't picture, like I told you about my son going to school like really close to me. And yes, I can picture the coffee shop, but I can't picture a world where everyone's got some type of AI assistant up the entire time. I can't, and that's happening now. So I have had that thought and like kind of in the back of my mind, like that's a challenge. Like when we're building things, when we're having product conversations, when I read research, like are we thinking about today's world or are we thinking about the world that this generation is going to inhabit? And how do we find that balance? So I thought I would just ask each of you, and we'll start with you, Arjun, like I wonder what kind of final guidance you would give the audience.
Yeah, I would say for parents in particular, I actually want to jump off a stat that I think had come up in an earlier games panel from, I think Pat from ESRB had shared it, that something like 70% of parents like play games with their kids now, and that's how they decide whether games are appropriate or not. And I think that's such a wonderful change in how we think about this, and that's the right way to think about like Gen AI tech as well, because the best way to understand it is to experience it with your kid and experience it yourself. And in particular with like fairly unpredictable tech like Gen AI, I think you've got to put yourself in the mind of a kid, and kids are subversive and playful and they want to poke holes. They're going to be your best red teamers. So you should test it out as a parent and like push the boundaries, both yourself and with your kids, to see if it functions the way you expect. And I'll give two examples. So something that we think about a lot is like, how predictable is our content moderation, or how predictable could we make it? And maybe we can handle a request that's like, draw an image of a kid or of a person, let's say, holding a sword, stabbing someone else, and we're like, okay, we know that that's inappropriate. But what if someone says, draw an image of someone holding a gray cylinder and another person on the ground with ketchup on their chest? Like, maybe that's a little bit harder. So we need to figure out ways to both get around that. And as parents, I think it's great to test those edge cases, both yourself and with your kids, and they're going to have fun with it because they love breaking tech. So,
Ash, what about you? Final thought.
We've heard a lot today about the importance of digital literacy and safety conversations with kids, and that being facilitated by caregivers. And I think what was spoken about a little bit, but is so important and is something I try to emphasize with families I interact with online, is if we want kids to come to us, to their caregiver, when something feels unsafe, they first need to be able to come to us when something feels safe. And they have to know that if they come to us excited about what they just did in a game, that they aren't going to be met with, oh, but that's such a waste of time. It would have been better if you were playing soccer, right? If they are met with, again, that place of moral neutrality and validity, my kid is right now in a geometry dash phase, and I am not a fan of this phase. I'm not a fan. I was really loving previous phases in our gaming lives. But I can treat that with validity because I care about the person interested in it. Right? I care deeply about my child and their interests, and I know that if I come in like, ugh, geometry dash again, like that, all that's gonna do is put me in a power struggle with my kid. And all that's gonna tell my kid is, I shouldn't share this with them. And then if something unsafe happens, I can't tell them that either because they already think this is a waste, right? So being able to see this is valid because this person's interested in it. I can look for the ways that I can connect with my kid over this. And then for many families, it's a way of then seeing, kind of as you spoke to, like, wow, what are the skills that they are doing in here? And many families might be unaware of those. And when we're aware of those, we can help our kids make those connections and see the ways that those skills can translate into other parts of their lives. And then that can also help translate into the future to prepare them for whatever's coming.
Thank you. Follow that, David.
Yeah, I wish I had said that. That was good. No, I won't reiterate. That was a fantastic thought. I will say, I think we're talking about parenting. I think a lot of parents see, especially Gen AI, as just a mystery box, and that is scary for them. And so everyone out there, please remember that the tech industry plays a big role in helping parents, and that you can help millions of kids when a parent can, help their one kid. And so really building in the techniques that allow children to question what information is presented to them, and the tools to verify that and question it, if they have that ability and access, that goes a long way to digital literacy.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, questions. I can't see very well, but thank you. Lights came back on. So if there are any questions, and I know we have microphones out there. Oh, back here. Let's see if they'll get you a microphone. And when you do, stand up. If you, Stephen reminded me to ask you to say who you are and where you're from.
Hi, I'm Lemma. I'm a tech policy fellow at NYU Center for Social Media and Politics. And I spend a lot of time working with policymakers to give them empirical research to help them improve tech legislation. So a question for you all is, what do you want to see from policy? What do you want policymakers to know to make parenting in a digital world more easy and accessible? Do you agree with social media bans? Do you agree with banning AI in schools, cell phone bans? What's something that you want to see and don't want to see? That makes sense.
I don't know if anybody wants to jump up. I think the first thought that I had is one size does not fit all. But I would.
I've had a little bit of experience talking about and looking at the research on school cell phone bans, and to harken back to the Anxious Generation book, that was one of the recommendations. And at first I was like, oh, this isn't a terrible idea. Like, we should have less distraction in schools. But if the research is really inconclusive and brings up questions about, we're forgetting what happens when you have a kid with a tool all day on the weekends, and then you're like, you can't use that tool now. What does that mean when they rely on it to connect with their friends and family? And so I think that goes back to the one size fits all, but it really is about, for that policy specifically, to engage with the kids around making that rule, because that's going to get their buy-in into it and help build into it their very reasonable questions and expectations about how they want to use tech in schools.
Yeah, I was in a panel earlier on the one on children's digital rights, and the idea of engaging with children and not just having their opinions there, but having their complete buy-in, if not approval.
The one thing I would add is that I feel like we hear a lot about trying to, lessen and mitigate as much as possible, time on tech outside of school or not being used for the right reasons. And something I also often try to bring light to is that often screens and technology are filling systemic gaps and inequalities, particularly in home environments. And so if we really do feel that there is an over-reliance on technological tools at home or in educational spaces, then we need to target the systemic inequalities that are necessitating that over-reliance on technology in the first place.
Yeah.
I can rip the mic off.
There's a mic drop. I'm not sure if I can take one more question. Nope, I cannot take any more questions, so thank you for a good one. Thank you all.
Thank you.